This is the Lockpicker 1969, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to another episode of Interview with a Lockpicker. Today's guest is PickSmith. Say hi, PickSmith.
Hello, how's it going?
So, how exactly did you get into lockpicking, locksport, and how did that get started for you?
When I was young, when I was 14, I actually spent the summer up in Laguna Beach with a family friend with a self taught lady locksmith, where I got to learn to rekey locks, pick locks, make keys, duplicate keys. And that transitioned later to a correspondence course with Foley Belsaw to become a locksmith, and then eventually became a locksmith and started my own company back in 1995, and have been doing it ever since. So for just many, many years, I've been picking locks. But it didn't get me to be a good picker. But a couple of years, about 2.5 years ago, I decided to learn how to really pick locks. And I had been seeing the Bosnian Bill, the LPL videos, and then started looking at the lock picks, started with Sparrows, Peterson, LLT, and just started to learn to pick the locks that always were ones I could never pick. And now I realize that every lock is pickable in the long run.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a question for you that I
Yeah.
would think some people would be interested in, especially if they've ever thought, what would it be like to go through and become a locksmith? So taking your hobby to the next level. So what was it like going through that process of becoming an actual locksmith, and what's involved in that?
Well, for me, it was a little bit different because I had used my skills in the property management maintenance setting for a little bit for learning to rekey some locks and do some basic locksmithing. When I decided to become a locksmith, since I had the basic skills, or the basic knowledge, um, I went and applied and talked to a couple different locksmiths until one decided to hire me on as an apprentice. And that
Oh,
also really showed me I knew nothing of being a locksmith. There is so much to learn that any class course, and even with what we do in the sport, picking, rekeying, taking apart locks, that is a minute portion of locksmithing. Locksmithing encompasses so much more that you cannot learn it unless you immerse yourself in it. And it's not always the easiest thing to get into because a lot of locksmiths don't hire apprentices. They're too small of a company. The bigger companies will hire an apprentice. Um, I know a guy from Discord here who's in San Diego with me, and he just got an apprentice job at one of the larger locksmiths. So we've been talking about that, which has been kind of cool that he was able to progress and step into that role. It can be done. It's not common to be able to find an opening for it, though.
yeah. Okay. All right. So how did you? So you became a locksmith. You then got more into actual picking. How did you break into making lockpicks then?
Well, I had joined Facebook and found the different groups for the lock picking, the art of lock picking, the Coliseum for the UK, and had seen, and somebody introduced me to the custom lockpick maker group. And I joined that and was just looking at these and going, wow, this is really cool. They're beautiful pieces of art. And it's just neat to make your own. And so I had actually gone back to my son's house, and he was helping. We were making knives. It was the first time I'd ever gotten a chance to make a knife and add handle scales to it. And it just got me thinking, going, this is as easy as it is, just in a smaller format. And he had lock picks because I've been teaching him how to pick locks for years. And so we just decided, okay, let's try to put handles on a couple Southord picks, and did it. And it was like, wow, that wasn't too bad. That was kind of cool. And so I came back home and said, I grabbed a set of SS devs that I had, said, let me pop some handles on these to see what they look like. And spent about a week doing it. And it's like, God, this is fun. It's cool. And it's more comfortable now than the pick ever could be with any other type of handle. And started to show my work and talk to the other guys and learn more. And that's the beauty of this sport in any aspect, that everybody's willing to help and tell you and show you and explain to you their ways of doing it. And then you find your own ways to do it. Yeah. And it progressed from just putting handles on to production picks to getting the steel and making a custom pick from scratch from a blank and pieces of wood. And it's a neat progression to go through and practice and see. That's about it.
Okay, so when's the video series going to come out?
D-Mac's doing it for me.
Yeah, I know. I caught that episode yesterday, and I've been commenting in there myself. So
yeah, no, that looks like it's going to turn out to be a good one. There's been a few. He mentioned the Daz Evers and the Lockpicking Dev series, which are great series. At some point, if I ever get time, I would like to do that too, because the one thing with custom pick making is that we all find a different way to do the same thing.
Exactly.
But there's certain things that are all inherently similar between them that you need to do.
Yes.
But after that, it's what works for you. Not everybody's method's going to work. And it can be as simple as just gluing wood to a pick and shaping it.
Yeah, well, I think there's processes that are the same from one person's approach to another in terms of the end result. It's what ways can you do it differently to achieve those end results based on perhaps the equipment and tools you have available. And that's really kind of what I was trying to point out in D-Mac's video when I was commenting. So it was about the use of a bandsaw and a jigsaw to do some of the cutting and so forth. So, but yes,
exactly,
100%. So
I commented the same thing, going, wow, you cut all the curves out with just this big giant saw. And it's like, well, that's kind of cool. And then you shape it. I mean, it just shows that everybody can figure a way to do it and make it work with the tools you have. You don't necessarily need special tools.
Yeah.
You do need a couple of specific tools for certain things, for punching metal, for shaping metal, and drilling pinholes.
Yep.
But when it comes down to shaping the wood, it can just be as simple as files. I know one of the great makers, Jeff Burke, the only tool he uses in making a custom pick is a drill. Everything else, from shaping the steel to the wood, brass, acrylic that he uses, everything is done by hand and hand tools. It's files and sandpaper and no Dremel. He just drills the pinholes with a drill. That's the only thing. But he'll spend 14 to 24 hours of time making a pick.
Wow. That's some dedication.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And once you get into when you're doing custom pick making, these picks will take you I think I've spent 14 hours building one pick. And it's small, it's intense, it's labor intensive, but it's a love at the same time.
Yeah. Yep, I'm planning on diving down that rabbit hole myself.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah. I've got all the tools and all the materials, just got to get the time. So
that's what we all need, is the time.
Yep. So you mentioned when we talked before this interview about naming your picks. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a quirk that each of my picks speaks to me, and I feel that it needs to become a personality. And so as I'm building it and looking at it and working it through. And when I finally get finished with it, usually something is solidified that it's got a name. Sometimes I don't have a name. My very first pick, I forgot who actually named it for me because it's a pierced piece. So it's got round holes all through the handle and it's like that. And I hadn't started, I had been naming some of the handled picks that I had, but I couldn't think of anything for that one. And somebody came up with Swiss cheese. So it's like, oh, perfect. This pick is now Swiss cheese. So it's just a quirk of mine that I like to name the picks because it gives them a personality as well, too.
Gotcha. So, can you explain a little bit in a bit of detail what your process is in creating and shaping your picks, in metal?
Yeah.
Metalworking?
So creating the picks, I've always wanted every pick to be a little bit different and try new and different things in every pick that I've made. I've only made one pick twice, and I'm on doing it again right now for a pick for the raffle for the LPU. But I like just to be inventive, creative, and make something that I haven't done before. And a lot of times it comes from a simple sketch. And once I start working and cutting the wood, and my favorite is wood because I've been a woodworker for years. So they just naturally come together and I'll shape the metal, create the wood to fit the metal. Most of my shaping is actually done and finishing is done after the fact of gluing up everything together, and it's just free form and mostly by eye. Don't do measurements. I will draw on the steel how I want it to cut, how I want to cut it, and a lot of times I have conflicting lines until I find something that just works and looks good to me, and then it'll even get further refined as I shape the steel, and then it even further refined after I put the wood on it, because when you put the wood on, something looks a little bit different. So
Yeah.
Everything I work by hand and eye and free form. That all my lines and everything are just done to appease my eye and my hand. As you start shaping a pick, you realize, oh, I need to take a little more off here. I need to contour this. It's going to be even more comfortable for any picker that it's going to.
Well, you see things you didn't see without the handle.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And then the other thing too is symmetry. For me, both sides of the pick have to be really symmetrical, and just have a solid look from tip to end of just everything flowing, smooth lines, and comfortable in the hand. Everything has to be comfortable in the hand.
OCD much?
Very much so.
Yeah, me
too. Very much so.
I can relate.
And that's where I can spend 14 hours. I can spend 2 hours with my Fordham rotary tool and just a little sanding tip and just shape a pick and just get lost in it for a couple hours until it's exactly what I'm going for. And it's hard to work in wood, and people will say that because you can instantly go too fast and take too much off. But that's the part I like about the wood, is going slow and soft. And I always know when a pick is ready because I want to keep it.
Yeah.
So
you always can take off a little bit at a time, but you can't put it back on.
That is so true. So true. And luckily, I haven't had to scrap a pick yet because it's always come out the way that I've wanted it to.
That's cool. So, who would you say were your biggest influences in pick making?
Oh, gee, that list is so long. It is everybody and every individual who is willing to take on and try and make their own pick. There's many of the big names, Hillbilly Locksport, Rat Yoke, XB Mods, Matt's Lock Pit, Jeff Burke, Mr. Picker, Gillenbursty, Dr. Weasel, DMAC. I, I could go on because everybody who's made a pick has been inspirational to me, because it's like you're willing to try it, and I know the process for it, and to me it's a very fulfilling uh, task to do. So it just, anybody who's willing to try it becomes an inspiration.
Okay. So a little bit off the track of pick making. So
Yeah.
we had a little chat, and you expressed how you felt about sparrows.
Yes. Sparrows was the first brand of pick that I bought, past the ones that I could get at my lock distributor, which were HPC and Rytan, which the Rytan true build DeForest, who was the first person to create that profile and work with Rytan to make it. That is my favorite pick every single day. I can pick any lock with that up in the real world. Um, so with Sparrows, I bought a bunch of different ones to work and play with, and uh, see how I found out. I didn't realize until later that a lot of pick makers actually build faults into their picks because they just repeat bad pattern that has been come down through the ages. But Sparrows actually introduces a couple of things that they do to try and increase the strength, but it actually creates a break point for their picks,
Okay.
most namely in a couple of their hooks. The handle down to the tang, where it comes to a sharp angle, that is always a break point because there's no supporting arch. Arches are the strongest form in the world for supporting anything, as we know. So the pick makers who actually come off the handle and make any kind of curve is stronger than the Sparrows angle like that. But that's a fault that also a lot of other picks share. But sometimes the steel makes up for it, like in the case of multi-pick. But on the Sparrow's hook, if you ever notice that on the bottom of the tang coming off the tip of the profile stays skinny, and then the bottom drops away at a slight angle, creating a ramp downwards. That's actually a leverage point and not supporting the tip. It becomes a fault point where the pick will start to bend faster
Hmm.
and eventually break when you move it back and forth eventually.
Okay.
So they've created a way to make the pick weaker in the long run. And so it's disappointing that they won't listen to everybody who's talked about it over the years and try and improve their picks. They're almost kind of blind and just go, we're making them because this is the way we know how to do them.
This is the way we're tooled to make them. This is the way we're going to make them.
Exactly.
So, whose picks would you say are well made other than custom made picks? So,
Well,
if the average lock picker out there wants to know what an actual lock pick maker thinks of an actual manufactured set of picks, and your opinion on that, what what would you say?
there's so many that I would recommend over anything else, but a lot of us can't afford them because they may be a little bit higher price. But for me, some of the standouts would be LLT, because they use the arching support system on their pick tips and they use a great steel. Jimmy Long's, who has a great
Yes.
small hook set. I don't have them yet, but I want them because I hear such good things about them.
They're awesome.
And Moki is also making production picks that are like that. When you get into, like I had mentioned before, multi-pick, which uses a great steel, but they build that fault into their tang, but the steel supports it, so it lasts a long time. So it depends. Steel can override the other thing. But for the most part, I always tell people, try a couple picks. Just buy one or two from every manufacturer. Yep. Find what you like, buy what you like.
100%
They're
agree.
all going to work for the basic beginner. It's not until you get into an advanced state where you're probably going to want some of these more unusual profiles. LLT makes most of all of their kits, but my favorite is their Valerian. The tip profiles on that is just amazing. There's a lot of the Tiffany tips, and their profiles that they use, and it's just such a perfect wide variety of pick tips in there.
I've made the investment in LLT, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's the only steel I'll use for custom pick making. I have bought some of the Peterson blanks, and I've only made one pick out of their steel, and it's the only pick that's broken that's a custom made pick. And it's like, wow. And I wonder if they cut the steel not with the grain. People don't realize that steel actually has a grain, and just like wood, wrong grain, it snaps in half. Right grain, it'll hold up a car or a house.
Wow. Okay, so last question before we kind of wrap up this interview. Can you explain your involvement in the mat system?
Okay, so as we all know, there's the belt system. Recently, I think within the past year or so, the mods at the LPU wanted to create a system for the black belts, because there are now what are called Dan points or Dan levels, that after you accumulate certain points, you become a higher ranked Dan as a black belt. It was so people could progress and not always be just a black belt. Two ways of getting the points to become Dans are picking locks, all the way up from blue belts to more black belt locks. The second one was that the mods needed a way to create a system for judging special projects. And judging isn't quite the right word. It is more of taking special projects and assigning them Dan points by a review system by peers and specialists. When they were creating this, they brought a few specialists in by nomination and invitation to those that they thought were exceptional in their fields, and therefore the right folk to help them set the standards. And so I was selected as one of those, a few others. And we worked in conjunction with everybody who are black belts, because it's kind of a club in a sense. Once you become a black belt, you get to be able part of the mat, to create what were called tier levels to assign points depending on the quality of the submissions of the projects. And the projects are everything: safe cracking, cutaway making, impressioning, challenge locks, DD picks and pick tips, disc detainer, pick making, tool and lock making. And there's also some other special projects of like special knowledge. For example, Mo, an LPU member, has created a website for everything about ASA. I mean, that website has more than ASA's website and more information than even the manufacturer's website.
Cool.
And so these are brought forth in the mat to be assigned a tier level based upon our thoughts and how we feel that it applies to the project itself. And there are certain requirements for the tier levels in specific categories. And it's cool because I still get to participate past the point of after we've set everything up and figured it out for the standards, to continue to help and give my opinions on what I think of these submissions. So it's a real interesting process. And once you become a black belt, you'll get to be part of this, which is kind of a cool little behind the scenes thing that we don't get to see on a daily level.
Yeah, that's cool. God, I wish we had a ton more time. There's a whole bunch more questions I could easily ask you, and we could probably talk for a long time. But
Yeah, just
I
like we
unfortunately
did.
have to wrap this episode up. Is there any one last thing you'd like to say to the listeners that are tuning in to listen about you?
Um, I, there's so many things that my mind is jumbled, and I can't pick on one of them other than, uh, I hope everybody will at least attempt to make a custom pick, whether it's a bare-handled pick and shaping the steel yourself, or just putting some wood onto a handle and feeling the difference, because that type of handle makes the pick even better than it was before.
Okay. I want to thank you for your time. This has been a awesome interview. I've really enjoyed talking with you and getting to know about you.
Me too, with you. And this is a great series, and it's just awesome to have a platform for each individual person to be able to hear other stories.
Exactly. That's what I was hoping for. All right,
Yep.
so I'm going to wrap this up. I'd like to thank everybody that listened and listened in. If you're a subscriber, thank you. If you're not a subscriber yet, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications and all so that you can be notified of new content as it becomes available, as well as notifications for giveaways and drawings for giveaways. Thank you for listening.